Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt. My name is Matt and I'm joined by Stefan and Ben to react to the news that Gareth Southgate has stepped down from his role as England manager following Sunday's Euro 2024 final defeat to Spain. Maybe it's a bit of news that a lot of people were expecting, but it's definitely a bit of news that will have a big impact on the future of English football. Ben, I want to come to you first as our resident Englishman and get your initial reaction to the news.
Yeah, I think it's a decision, as you mentioned, we probably all expected to happen regardless of how Euro 2024 played out. And I think it's an understandable change. I think 8 years, and for me, the England manager's job is potentially the most stressful job in world football. The amount of scrutiny you have to take, even if you do fairly well, you're going to get constant abuse from the media and fans. And I think we've sort of noticed this tournament, it started to really take its toll on Southgate. So it's a decision. I think it's probably the right decision after 8 years to move on for both England and Southgate himself. I do feel though there should be a little bit more respect on Southgate's name, and I touch on that in the piece that you can see on Transfermarkt's website. I just feel like, football, like obviously everyone wants to win trophies, but it's not solely about that. And in terms of what he's given England fans over the last 8 years, it's much more than certainly for the rest of my life preceding that. To get to a semi-final of a World Cup and 2 Euros finals, only missing out on penalties and a last-minute winner for Spain, obviously, on Sunday night. So to have those memories of getting through those wins in the tournament and stuff, those England memories, they'll stay with me for life. And before that, we also had a great squad with the original golden generation with Beckham, Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, Rooney. Obviously, you could name more. But with that generation, they never even got past the quarter-final. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about how tough international football is. I understand a lot of the scrutiny comes from sort of the defensive style, and with the attacking players that England have got in that squad, a lot of people wanted him to take the shackles off. And that's understandable. But I would say probably this Euro 2024 was the exception in terms of a team that played quite expansive football actually won it and were probably the best team, because I don't think we often see that in international tournaments. If you look down the years, even just sprung to my mind then, France's 2018 World Cup win, it was based on defensive football, 1-0 wins. That is often how you get over the line in international football, and it's essentially what's taken England to 2 Euros finals. To summarise, I think it's a good decision for both parties, but I think Southgate's done a great job as England manager.
I think the biggest criticism, Stefan, that's been put on Southgate, specifically in this tournament in Euro 2024, but even reaching back as far as 2020 and 2018, is that he's had such an exceptional squad. I think with that comes a bit of a different headache in that a lot of his best players were concentrated into a certain area of the pitch. They've had Walker, Trent and Trippier as their right backs, their three best full backs all on the one side. He's moved Trippier across the left back at times, put Trent in midfield. But in this tournament up top, you have to try and fit in Kane, Watkins, Gordon, Bellingham, Foden, Saka and more. It's definitely been a difficult thing for him to contend with. But looking back on his era at England as a whole, would you think that would be the deciding factor, that maybe the players could have achieved more, or do you think Southgate has done what he could have done?
Yeah, well, I just want to begin by saying it's great that we have Ben on this video, because he's had a very busy morning and it was almost going to be yourself, Matt, me and you, in which would have been two Scots and an Irishman talking about Gareth Southgate's legacy in England, which I think it may have caused a few problems on YouTube. But to go back to the question you asked, it's such an interesting one. I've kind of landed on this idea that there's this kind of weird kind of Gareth Southgate paradox that's happened with England, where he is at the same time England's best ever manager in the modern era, but consequently probably not the right man to take them to the next step. And that's probably more to say, that's probably something that's maybe more a description of how England have underperformed historically, in the sense that, they obviously maybe should have done much better in the past, but also just shows how well they have come, or how far they've come under Southgate. Remember before he got appointed, I think was obviously that infamous defeat to Iceland. And as Ben makes a fantastic fantastic argument rather, he makes in his article about Southgate's legacy, you can go right through the entire history of the English national team, and only Sir Alf Ramsey rather is the only one who can maybe argue he had a better record than Southgate. So there's those kind of, like I said, it's a kind of weird paradox where I think you can say at the same time he's been a fantastic England manager, but they now need someone better. And I think you're absolutely right, Matt. You can kind of narrow in on specific tactical issues throughout the tournament. I do kind of feel like at times throughout this European Championship, England kind of got through just on the sheer strength and depth that they have in that team. Southgate got a lot of praise for the kind of way that substitutes came into the game, but it's not as if he had to kind of, magic up some sort of wonderful system to get the best out of players like Ollie Watkins or Ivan Toney or most notably Cole Palmer. Cole Palmer could have came on for any team in this championship and been a difference maker because he is a top class player, and that's a testament just to the incredible strength and depth that England have. And my frustration as a neutral watching England at times this tournament was the fact that Southgate didn't really seem to have the courage to drop guys like Harry Kane, where, I think maybe other players we actually saw, obviously, in the Copa America final, Leo Messi getting brought off at halftime. Then maybe that was his decision, and maybe that criticism should be actually placed on Harry Kane's shoulders, where he should have stepped up and said, look, guys, I'm not 100% fit. It's time for you to drop me, Gaffer. And maybe that's something that the players have to step up and do rather than the manager himself. But you can definitely understand when you look through that team, and particularly in the final, where you can say, well, maybe someone with better kind of tactical acumen, maybe someone with a little more experience or courage to kind of drop star players over the course of the tournament, maybe got a little bit further. But I just don't really want to kind of labour that point, because the England that Southgate inherited and the England that he's left behind are completely different nations. And what's perhaps most important is that his legacy might not even just be these two finals that he's reached, but also the kind of platform that he's built for the next guy to come in and potentially go one step further to win, the European Championships in the future, or even the next World Cup.
Yeah, just to finish up on his legacy, I think a big thing that's let Southgate down is that even in this last tournament, 8 years into his tenure, he didn't know his best 11, and he didn't even know his best formation. Switching formation midway through a tournament is never a good sign. You look at Julian Nagelsmann in Germany, and maybe aside from the Leroy Sané, Florian Wirtz rotation that we saw during the Euros, he knew his best 11. The same with Luis de la Fuente at Spain, which of course resulted in them winning the trophy. But for Southgate, when he's brought so many of those players through into the England team, after 8 years not really knowing the best way to utilise that, maybe that could be one of the reasons that he's leaving without a trophy to his name. But for more on Southgate's legacy, do check out Ben's piece. It'll be linked down in the description below. You'll also find down there a piece that Stefan wrote on what comes next for England. And I want to touch on that a little bit with you now, Stefan, because there's a lot of names being thrown about, and there has been for a number of weeks, about who could potentially be the next English manager. Can you talk to us a little bit about that piece that you wrote?
Yeah, so we actually wrote this just before Southgate announced his resignation. So really handy timing, really, to be perfectly honest with you. But there are kind of a number of names who've kind of came to the fore, which probably won't be a huge surprise to fans of England or English football. Some recognisable names in there. Perhaps the most high-profile one is Jürgen Klopp. I think, as I say in the article, this is quite an outlandish suggestion, but he has been linked with the Germany and United States international team jobs since he left Liverpool. And even though he turned down the United States job, I think it's quite interesting to know that prior to Nagelsmann getting the job in Germany, the reports were suggesting that Klopp had his eye on that job. And now that Nagelsmann not only got the position, but decided to stay put and extend his deal there, you would think that if Klopp was kind of angling for an international job, some might say a degree of semi-retirement from the very serious and very stressful nature of football management, then England would presumably be his second best choice, since he obviously has an affinity to the country. Still very, ambitious suggestion, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Equally, Frank Lampard's one who's been linked with the job as well, simply due to the kind of nature of him being unemployed and kind of stumbling around English football from club to club. But former England international, a young manager who me looking at that kind of position as something that he could use to kind of get back onto the ladder of international management. And Graham Potter's another one as well, who is an interesting name, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Again, maybe a bit like Lampard, a young head coach who perhaps kind of has to rebuild his reputation as a manager, and me look at that England squad and what it's capable of as a potential, I don't want to say as a stepping stone, because that's obviously quite disrespectful to the England national team, but it's a job that Lampard and Potter may both look at and think, well, if I can even do 10% better than what Southgate did, then that's unequivocal success, and that kind of lines me up for maybe bigger jobs down the line. But I think, and I think probably the most likely one, and also weirdly enough, the most unknown one, is of course Lee Carsley, who has been doing a fantastic job with the England under 21s. He won the European Championships not too long ago with the under 21 side, and of course is in the position that Southgate was in before he got promoted to the main job as well. So those are the 4 main contenders. There are some other names which we can definitely mention. I'll let Ben jump in a moment and he can add to what he thinks of all those names. But I think those are the 4 main contenders, and I'd be surprised if it wasn't one of them, to be perfectly honest with you.
I think for me, Graham Potter is certainly one to watch. There's long been links between him and the England job, and looking at the roles he's turned down or maybe not taken in the last 6 or so months, that maybe this was on his agenda. And also with Lee Carsley turned down the role for the Irish national job to stay within that English setup. So I'm sure his ambitions are also to take that first team job. Ben, as an English fan, what are your thoughts on the next manager?
Yeah, to be honest, obviously it's very early on in the process and we don't know the exact route the FA are going to take. But for me, I would put it down probably to the 3 names of Lee Carsley, Eddie Howe and Graham Potter. Jürgen Klopp, it would be amazing, but I'd be baffled if he took that job. He made it no secret in his time in England that he hates the English media pretty much. And he'd be stepping into the job where the English media love to just slate someone. And he's sort of always gone to clubs where he's got a bit of an affinity, where the fans sort of suit his style at Dortmund and Liverpool. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if that one came off. But with Lampard as well, I mean, the main issue with Southgate, I think off the field stuff, he's been brilliant at uniting the team and sort of getting rid of that club rivalry within the England setup and creating a connection again. But his biggest downfall has probably been his tactical side of it. He's probably not quite as elite as some other managers. From what we've seen of Lampard, I'm not sure he takes us any further in that department from his club time at Chelsea and Everton, respectively. So I do think that Lee Carsley could be a strong option. As Stefan mentioned, it's a similar route to Southgate, where he was under-21 boss and came through. He knows the FA's setup. And obviously, I think the FA would certainly consider Southgate as a successful appointment. They could potentially go down that route again. Lee Carsley, from what I've seen of the under-21s and from what I've heard about him, is a very detailed coach that could be what sort of England need going forward, and Graham Potter would also tick that box as well. And I think Potter's also got that tick to his name that he's good at the off the field stuff as well and making players want to play for his teams. One other name potentially that we haven't mentioned could be Gary O'Neill. He's obviously done a superb job at Wolves, done well at Bournemouth before that. He's English. I do see the FA making an English appointment. So he could potentially be one to look out for as well. Been really impressed with his coaching at Wolves. But yes, I'd say the front runners right now for me personally would be Lee Carsley, Eddie Howe and Graham Potter.
Matt, could I just jump in there before we finish up? Sorry, just before we do. I just want to add that it'd be really interesting to see who the English FA go for, because, as we talked about, it makes perfect sense that it is someone like Carsley, and, that would kind of continue Southgate's legacy. But it's easy to forget that Southgate was almost kind of thrust upon them through the manner in which, Allardyce kind of lost his role at England, and the kind of drama that was kind of surrounding the England national team before Southgate came in. It wasn't as if they kind of sat down and said, he's our guy, he's been our guy for a long time, we've always planned for Southgate to be the head coach. It was kind of thrust upon them through circumstances. So it's not as if the English FA, well, I don't want to say they don't deserve credit for kind of cherry-picking Southgate, but he wasn't their first choice. So it'll be interesting to see if they, having seen the success with Southgate, go down a similar route with Carsley or something like that, or they kind of revert back to the mean of saying, well, let's just get the biggest person we can get, and that's when you kind of start going down this Sven-Göran Eriksson, Fabio Capello, Sam Allardyce, Roy Hodgson kind of route, where you go for older, more experienced head coaches. So that'll be the only kind of span in the works, shall I say, that I think is maybe worth bearing in mind ahead of who they do appoint.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below about Gareth Southgate's tenure with England and who you think could be the right man to take them that next step in the upcoming major tournaments. Hit the like button if you have enjoyed this conversation. Make sure to check out those pieces we've linked in the description, and subscribe to the channel if you want more of these chats throughout the summer. But as always, thanks for watching.